Okay, that's all great, but what about this blank space around our elements? Where does it come from? This blank space is margin. It's a part of the box model and one of the 4 parts that every HTML element has. So every HTML element has a box around it. That box is like an onion with 4 layers. The browser handles them differently for block and inline elements. So today you'll learn about the content, padding, border, and margin layers and their differences for the block and inline elements. It's absolutely important for you to understand the box model in CSS because you'll work with it in one way or another most of the time. It's a part of every element on your web page. For that, we'll use developer tools. So to study it, we are interested here in the Computed tab. In this area, the browser visualizes the box model of our element and it's all 4 layers. Our div doesn't have any margin, border, or padding, so the values are blank. And this blue rectangle in the center is for the content area. The left value is width in pixels, and the right value is height in pixels. Notice when I hover over this blue rectangle that represents the div's content area, the browser simultaneously highlights the actual content area on the page. Okay, so the content is the first layer in the box model. It's where text and images appear. The div's content area is this text and this free space. Because div is a block element, so the browser stretches out its content area to take up all the width available. The link's content area is only as big as its text, because it's an inline element. For block elements, such as our div, we can set the width and height of the content area. For that, we use the properties with the same names. So let's set the width of our div to 200 pixels. Save the file, refresh the page, there you go. Now it doesn't take up all the width and only is 200 pixels wide. Now, by default, the block element's content area is as high as the height of the content inside. So this div's content area is as high as this text. Let's change its height and set it to, say, 50 pixels. Save the file, refresh the page. Now it takes up more vertical space. We can set the width and height for block elements, but we cannot set the width and height for inline elements. If we try to do so, the browser will just ignore those properties. Let me show you. I'm gonna copy those properties to our second CSS rule that affects all the links on our page. Save the file, refresh the page, and the link size hasn't changed at all. And the content box for our link still matches the actual text size, even though we have these numbers here that the browser just ignores. Okay, so adding the width and height properties for inline elements is just a waste of time. So I'm going to remove them. Now the second layer in the box model is padding. Padding adds empty space around the content. We can configure it with the padding property. Let's add some padding to our div. It's going to be padding, 10 pixels. Save the file, refresh the page. Notice that padding shifted the div's content. And now if I inspect the div in developer tools, we have 10 pixels of padding on all sides. And when I hover over the padding, the browser highlights it for the element on the page. Okay, the padding property actually is a shorthand property. When we put a single value here, the browser sets this padding value to all the sides. But if we want, we can set the padding value for every side separately. Let's do that. First goes the top padding value. It's going to be 10 pixels, so I'm going to leave this value as it is. Space. Then we put the value for the right padding, 20 pixels. Then the bottom, 30 pixels. And the last one is for the left padding. It's 40 pixels. we need to separate each value with a space. Save the file, refresh the page, there you go. 10, 20, 30, and 40. So the order is always top, right, bottom, and left. You can memorize the order by imagining a clock. Start at the top, 12 o'clock, and move clockwise. So top, right, bottom, and left. Or you can use the treble mnemonic for top, right, bottom, and left. Make sure you remember this order. You'll use it often with padding and other properties too. I used different padding values here for us to easily distinguish the sides. Normally, you'd use symmetrical values here, like 10 pixels for the top and bottom, 20 pixels for the right and left. Symmetrical padding values are used so frequently that the browser allows us to set only the top and right values, like this, and then it's going to repeat them for the other sides. So if I set the padding value like this, the browser will use 10 pixels for the top padding and also for the bottom padding, and 20 pixels for the right and left padding. Save the file, refresh the page, there you go. 10, 10, 20, 20. Now let's look at the third layer of the box model, which is the border. It surrounds the padding and content layers. Let's set the border for our div. So it's going to be border, colon, and first we specify how thick our border is. Let's make it 5 pixels. Then we can set the style. Most of the values here are the same as with the text decoration style property. I'll set solid to have a single line border. Then we can set the color. It's going to be royal blue. Save the file, refresh the page, there you go. Now we have a 5 pixel royal blue border around this div. The border property is a shorthand property that creates the border from all 4 sides. We can add the side name if we want the border only on one or several sides. Let's change it so our border is only on the top. I'll add dash and then goes the side name, so top. Save the file, refresh the page, royal blue border on the top. Let's add another one for the bottom. So I'm going to write border dash bottom, colon, 5 pixels, solid, royal blue. Save the file, refresh the page, there you go, top and bottom. Let's add another one for the left side. Save the file, refresh the page, great. And we can change it to the right for the right side. Refresh the page, there you go. The last layer for our box is the margin. Margin is the space outside the border of an element. Margins push other elements away from the box. Like paddings, margins don't have color. They are transparent. But unlike paddings, background doesn't extend to margins. You'll see that in a second. Now let's set a margin for our div. I'll write margin, colon, and what about 15 pixels? Save the file, refresh the page. Now there is a 15 pixel margin that separates our div from the outside elements. In developer tools, it's this orange area. The margin property is a shorthand property too. When we have one value here, the browser will use it to set the top, right, bottom, and left margins. And just like with the padding property, we can separately configure every side here too. And the side order is the same: top, right, bottom, and left. So just like with padding, the values go clockwise, starting from the top. Okay, so 5 pixels for the top margin, 10 pixels for the right, 20 pixels for the bottom, and 40 pixels for the left. Save the file, refresh the page, there you go. 5, 10, 20, and 40. And like with padding, we can set 2 values here, and the browser will use them for the rest. sides. Refresh the page. The browser used 5 pixels for the top and bottom sides and 10 pixels for the right and left sides. If you want to set a margin only for one side, then CSS has a property for that. Say we want to set only the left margin to 30 pixels. I'll remove this, and then I'm going to write margin-left and 30 pixels. Save the file, refresh the page. Now there is only the left margin, which is 30 pixels. When we add padding, border, and margin to a block element like our div or a paragraph, the browser pushes all the elements outside the box. So if I add the margin bottom property and set it to say 10 pixels, save the file, refresh the page, the link is pushed 10 pixels down. And if I increase the border bottom for our div to say 15 pixels, save the file, refresh the page, the link is pushed down even further. Same with padding. Let me increase the padding top and bottom to 15 pixels. Save the file, refresh the page, the link is pushed down even further. Now it works this way with block elements. With inline elements, it's a different story. Now let me duplicate our link a couple of times to have a couple of inline elements right next to each other. And I'm going to add the BR element here to move this link to the next line. Save the file, refresh the page, close developer tools. There you go. Now we have 3 inline elements here. Okay, so first let's add the top and bottom borders to all of our links. I'm just gonna copy these. Save the file, refresh the page. When I refreshed the page, the top and bottom borders appeared, but the browser didn't push away any elements. That's because for inline elements, the top and bottom borders, paddings, and margins are applied, but will not make other elements move away. But let's test them. So I'll add top and bottom paddings. So padding top, 5 pixels, and the same for the padding bottom. Save the file, refresh the page. Again, the box and background of our links have increased, but the browser didn't move away any elements. Only the borders were pushed away because they are parts of those links. Lastly, I'll add huge top and bottom margins to our links. So margin top, 100 pixels. And margin bottom is going to be 100 pixels too. Save the file, refresh the page, and again, nothing moved. The browser just ignored the top and bottom margins of our links because they are inline elements. So it's important for you to remember that for inline elements, the bottom and top paddings, borders, and margins are applied but will not cause other elements to move away. But with left and right paddings, borders, and margins, it's a different story. They will cause other elements to move away. To test that, let's add the same borders, but now for the left and right. Save the file, and when I refresh the page, look at what happens to the link. And refresh. The browser pushed the links farther away. Now let's add left and right paddings. So padding left, 5 pixels, and padding right, 5 pixels too. Save the file, refresh the page. The elements have been pushed away again. Now let's add margin left, 20 pixels, and margin right, 20 pixels again, to our links too. Save the file, refresh the page. The elements have been pushed away again. Now this link's text went down to the next line because there is not enough horizontal space to fit it in the same line. Let me resize the browser window a little bit. There you go. And if I open Developer Tools and inspect our link, there is this orange margin area to the left and right. Okay, if the box model seems too complex and overwhelming, don't worry, it just takes time to master it. Watch this video on the box model, experiment with those properties on your own, and have some rest. Repeat that several times and you'll start to get it. So, block elements start on a new line and inline elements don't. Block elements by default take up the full width available, whereas inline elements only take up as much width as they need for the content. We can change the width and height properties for block elements, but we cannot change the width and height properties for inline elements. For inline elements, their width and height are determined by their content. Every HTML element has 4 layers, like an onion: content, padding, border, and margin. For block elements, paddings, borders, and margins from all sides will cause other elements to be pushed away. For inline elements, only the left and right paddings, borders, and margins will cause other elements to be pushed away. And these were the essentials of the box model in CSS.
If this video was helpful, subscribe to get more. Now check out this next video.